Welcome to this Getting Started with SharePoint Framework tutorial series, and in this tutorial we're looking into how to provision SharePoint assets as part of your SharePoint Framework solution. And what it means is that your SharePoint Framework solution, or a web part or an extension, whatever the components you have inside of the solution, might be dependent, for example, on a SharePoint list existing within the site. And technically, sure, you could actually implement this by running a REST API inside of your web part, but what if your end users does not have permission to actually create the needed list to the site, but the web part doesn't actually work until the actual list exists, or a column or a content type or any other assets exist on the existing site. So what we want to do in this tutorial is include instructions or definitions for SharePoint to create the dependent list and a few configurations for a list for a specific web part. So we're building imaginary web part, which then has a dependency of a list getting provisioned whenever that web part is being used in the SharePoint site. This is the September 2018 edition, so we are refreshing these tutorials as we are releasing a new versions of SharePoint Framework to be used. Now, let's jump right into it. I'm going to explain the reasoning and different options behind of this tutorial and behavior as we move along within this tutorial. So first of all, let's create again a folder for our solution, and that's going to be asset deployment web part. So let's go to the asset deployment web part. In here, we want to run the Yeoman generator, SharePoint Yeoman generator, and let's actually follow up on the tutorial on the selection of things. So using the default value is absolutely fine. We want to target SharePoint Online, and we want to use the current folder because we're already at the folder level. We do not want this to be deployed as a tenant scoped setting. And this setting in this particular scenario, this actually has a big meaning. So if you would select here a yes, that would mean that the web part in this solution and extensions in the solutions would be available across all of the sites within a tenant just by adding the solution to the app catalog. And that also means that any provisioning instructions for that web part in a site level would be ignored because you are not explicitly installing the solution to the site itself. So in this particular scenario, we want to have this solution to be installed on a site, and as part of that installation of the solution, we want to provision a list, and in the later stage also update that list with additional columns. And that means that in this case we're going to say no, because this solution is designed in a way that we want that to be installed on a site explicitly using the end user, or alternatively using the ALM APIs, which are also available for you in SharePoint Online. And in this case, we are creating a web part. So we're going to choose a web part, and we are able to, well, let's give it a name, asset deployment web part, and asset deployment web part as the description. And it doesn't really matter what JavaScript option we want to use, because we're not really concentrating on the web part implementation. We're going to concentrate on the provisioning instructions when the solution is activated in the site level. Now, the scaffolding will take again a while, so let's speed up the video until the full scaffolding is completed. And here we go, now the scaffolding is fully completed. So let's open up the Visual Studio Code and start adding in definitions to be precise, feature framework definitions for our solution. So we want to have a list and certain columns and content types in that list to get provision. And how we do that in a SharePoint Framework solution is that first of all, we need to have a SharePoint folder, and this folder is automatically created whenever you bundle, or sorry, whenever you package your web part, but by default it is not there. And inside of the solution folder, we want to actually create a folder called assets. So in here we can then add our XML structures, which we're going to include as part of the solution packaging. And in this case, we want to actually have a field and a content type and a list instance with a custom schema to be deployed as part of the solution. And this is what the SharePoint Framework solution can provision. So you cannot actually provision everything what is available as part of the feature framework XML schema. There's a subset of things what the solution can actually provision. And these are fields and site columns, content types, list instances, and list instances with custom schema. Now, let's actually start by defining some fields and content types, which we will then use inside of the list which we instruct for SharePoint to create. So first things first, we actually want to create a file in here, which is called elements.xml. Technically, the file name doesn't really matter, but it's kind of a common practice to call this elements.xml based on an old historical naming convention in the feature framework. Let's quickly have a look on what we're doing here. So we're introducing a one field in the group of SPFx columns called a amount, which is a type of currency, and we're providing some additional configurations on it. And this is basically automating the same step as from the end user perspective. You would create a column to the list manually. The second column here is the SPFx cost center, and we're providing a few different choice options for the choice field. Then we're creating a content type. So we're creating a cost center content type, which references those two fields. So basically, content type is like a business object, which is then defining two attributes. So in this case, cost center and the currency. And then what we're doing is that we want to actually create a list, which in this case is named slightly awkwardly. It is an SPFx list, but if we want to use the convention or the analogy of cost center, we could actually say something like invoices in this case. And in this case as well, we want this to be a SharePoint list. So the 100 template type 100 here means that it is a custom list. It's not a document library, it is a custom list. 101 would actually mean a document library. If you're not familiar with this, with template type IDs and all of that, everything is absolutely documented in the documentation. Now, the one thing what's actually interesting here is that we're also referencing a schema.xml file in this list instance. So we are creating a custom list, but we are saying that on runtime, when that list is getting created, please use this alternative schema.xml file, which defines what kind of list is to be created. So let's actually create the schema.xml file right next to element.xml. Oop, another folder, a file. No, I don't want to actually create a folder. I want to create a file. So let's actually call this a schema.xml. I'm going to paste in the structure from the tutorial directly in here. And what does it actually mean? Well, this is actually a super simple schema.xml file. It basically defines that we have a basic list or at the 100 in the list instance element defined that we are creating list. This creates or defines what kind of list it will be. And this says that this will reference a content type automatically to this list. It will have a one view in the main web part zone, and that view will by default have three different columns. So it will have a title column, it will have a SPFx amount column, and it will have an SPFx cost center column, which are basically the same columns which are part of this content type. So let me actually go back on the element.xml file. We can see that the content type ID is actually matching on this content type. So we first provision columns, then the content type, which is the business object. Then we create an instance of a list, and in that instance of a list we'll say that, well, this list is for storing those content types or the business object which are based on that structure. That's basically what we're doing here in an XML structured way. Good. Now our basic schema or basic setup is ready to go, but we need to make sure that these definitions or this structure is also updated or included in the solution packaging. So when we do the solution packaging, we run the solution packaging based on package solution JSON. And by default here, there is no feature XML definitions or any additional things. So we need to actually get a few additional settings available. So let me actually copy from the tutorial, again, a few additional configurations. Here we go, and I'm kind of pasting that one in here, and let's see what we actually get here. So first of all, there is a request of update the ID with the new GUID. So let's actually change this GUID slightly, so we get a unique GUID on that. So easiest way to change the GUID is just a randomize, for example, one of the numbers, so that A to be 2, and voila, we have a unique GUID. Now, in this case, what are we doing here? So we're basically saying, as part of this solution packaging, we will have a one feature. That's a definition for a one feature. That feature will have a title of Assets Deployment Web Part Client-Side Solution. That's the description of it, which could be much more descriptive. That's a unique ID of the feature. That is the version of the feature. And inside of that feature, we have two different files. So we have an element.xml file, which is an elements manifest, and then we have an element file, which is a schema.xml. And adding this entry here will then make sure that whenever we run the package solution, we actually get the structures and the files included in our SPFx file. So let's actually have a look on that. So let me go to the command line. Let me clear that one. Let me run a collab bundle. So that's going to bundle the files and JavaScript files of the web part to be ready to be packaged. And now, there we go. So that didn't actually take that long. So here we go. Good. And then we want to do collab package solution. So we're actually packaging the SPFx file, and you can see this when that happens in the left menu in here. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Now I have a solution folder. And if I extend the solution folder, I can see the SPFx file. And like we explained in the let's say the first tutorials, you can always extend the debug folder to see all of the JavaScript files and other assets which are included inside of the SPFx file. So basically this is the structure which gets packaged inside of the SPFx file. And from here we can then verify, did we get our schema.xml files? Did we get all of the element.xml files and everything else included in the packaging? And the answer is clearly yes. So the element.xml file is here, and the schema.xml file is located in here. So we should be good to go. So the files are inside of the SPFx file, and we are pretty much good to go of testing this in practice. So let's actually do that. So let me go to the command line. Let me start File Explorer in that folder. Let me go to the SharePoint folder, and inside of the solution folder, we now have the SPFx file. Let me go to the process session, which we want to use for deployment and testing. So let's actually put that one slightly smaller. Let me go to the app catalog site in my tenant. And in the app catalog site, I want to go to the apps for SharePoint, and I want to track and dot that SPFx file in here. And obviously then there's the trust operation. So I need to trust the solution before that will be visible for anybody to get installed. So in this case, it is referencing localhost, but technically we're not now interested on even testing the web part. We're interested on making sure if the assets are getting provisioned or not. So let me click deploy. So the solution is now available. We can see that there is no errors. It is not tenant deployed. It is available to be used within the solution, within the sites. Now let me move to a one site collection or a site where I want to actually install this. And this is a modern group associated site where we have already one solution installed. In this case, we're going to add another application. And if we have a look on the apps you can install, I can see the asset deployment web part client side here. Clicking that one, that actually is now starting the installation process of that particular web part to this particular site. And because we have those XML files, because we have the XML structures inside of this SPFx file, we're basically instructing SharePoint now to create the list, or first of all create the columns, and then create the content type, and then create the list, which is then available, for example, to be used in the context of web part. And now when we started this tutorial, I touched this already. Why wouldn't you run a code to actually create the list? Well, sure. if every single end user which is running the JavaScript file and running the web part would have permissions to create the list. So quite often what actually would happen is that the end user does not have the managed permissions to the site. So if that is the scenario where your web part is then getting executed, you would get an exception until a person who has sufficient permission would actually then run the JavaScript and the list would get created. The fact that we are defining the instructions or the XML, we're using the XML-based provisioning, is that the end user only needs to have a permissions to add an app to the site, and that is sufficient for the assets to actually get provisioned. So now if we refresh the site contents, we can actually see that we have a new list available, which is SPFx list. If I open up that one, it is a custom list. It has a title, amount, and a cost center. And I'm able to add a new item in here. Amount 800, cost center was a choice field. And I can actually then select what is the choice field. And there's a title of the cost field as well. Let's call that a Seattle office. I don't know. And let's save actually that one. So we can actually see that the column settings and everything else is ready to go for the web part. So now if the web part assumes that this column exists on the list, that would be the case automatically when we install the solution to the site. Now, the next thing what we're going to actually test is how do we upgrade these things. So there is this kind of, I wouldn't say an advanced scenario, but in certain cases you might have a requirement that the next version of your web part should actually add a new list or a new column to the existing list or have a modification. So let's actually test that one out. So what does it actually mean that we are upgrading our web part? How would it behave differently? So let's go to the solution. Let me close up all of the unnecessary files so we can actually start again from a clean table. We want to again work in the assets folder. In the assets folder, and we can define a v2 element XML. So this is basically defining what is the difference between version 1 and version 2. So this is the one which we should get installed as part of the version 2 of the solution. Now, what we also need to do is that we need to make sure that this one, this solution is also included inside of the package solution structures. And to do so, making sure that this feature, well, the new element is getting activated whenever we actually then install a new version of the solution, we need to actually explain SharePoint to this to really happen. So what it means is that we need to actually create an upgrade definition. So let's actually create a new file to this folder. So that's going to be upgrade actions v2. And in this file, we're going to actually add one element manifest command. Now we need to actually update this XML, so the GUID itself accordingly. So let me actually double check what is the structure or the structure of the GUID, and that is actually that one in there. So I'm going to copy that GUID based on the structure what we're using. So let me actually paste in that one over there. So here we go. So basically what we're doing here is that we're telling SharePoint that whenever there will be an upgrade action happening, we should apply whatever is inside of the elements v2 XML file. And this element v2 XML file will end up inside of this folder. So that's why we're referencing the elements v2 XML using the feature XML path over there. Now we have what should be applied. We have the action which is saying for SharePoint that, hey, now this is what should happen. Now we still need to make sure that we actually package this properly inside of the SPFx file. And where do we actually do that? 1, 2, 3, we do it in the package JSON, package solution JSON file. So let's actually go to the package solution. In here, right now we're referencing elements XML file. So we need to actually reference the other XML file as well. So let's add that one there. And it is v2 XML. So we can see that the file name is over there. Then we need to also add one additional thing. So we can add actually here a new line. Here we go. So adding here upgrade actions, and there is even IntelliSense. So we can add an upgrade actions there. And in what is the file where we have our upgrade actions? Well, the file was upgrade actions v2 XML in here. So I'm going to actually copy that XML name. I'm going to reference that here properly. I'm going to save the settings. Everything has been saved, saved. No problems with that. And now we need to do another packaging of the solution. So let me flip back on the command line. Let me do call bundle. Just making sure that everything is up to date and ready to go packaged. Technically, actually, the call bundle wouldn't have to be executed in here right now in this case, because we don't actually bundle in a JavaScript version. Now, it is, however, to good practice to get used to run the bundle command, so you'll do that before you actually package the solution. So now if I do gulp package solution, and we get a new version of the solution available. But then I realized that first of all, there's a typo in my command, but at the same time when I'm actually executing that, I forgot about something super important, which is well written also in the tutorial. We did not modify the version of the solution. So we didn't actually explain for SharePoint that there is a new version available in the solution, which is clearly defined also in the written tutorial. So let's go back on package solution, and we can see that we have a version entry. And in here, we want to actually say version 2. And well, we can actually do the version 2 also in the feature framework. So this makes sure that solution file, there's a new version of solution file indicating that for SharePoint, and there's a new version of the feature framework file. So whenever we are then upgrading, we also apply all of the upgrade actions defined in this XML file. Now, those are now done. So let's go back on our command line. Let's actually fix the package solution command. So let's clear this slightly. So here we go. So gulp package solution. And that is now creating a new version again of the SPFx file. Here we go. Now, if I remember correctly, we should have a file explorer, which is already in the solution folder. So this is now the latest version of that solution. We should have also a browser version, a browser open somewhere, which is in the app catalog. So here we go. Now we are in app catalog. Let's double check the current settings. Asset deployment web part client-side solution is a version 1.000. We want to get a new version of that one available. Drag and drop, point it, replace. Now, what's super important now to realize that whenever we do this, whenever we actually add this new version of the solution available, the web part code is immediately reflected. So now the latest version of the web part code will start executing automatically, because this is a new version which we're installing in a centralized location, and the web part code, the JavaScript files, the images, the other assets which potentially have there, is one centralized location where those are hosted. But the actual site level upgrade action is only for the feature framework elements. So the JavaScript is updated, but we haven't actually updated yet the feature framework elements in the site level. So in your implementation, in your code of a JavaScript, you need to have a logic there trying to figure out, okay, is the new structure, is the site already changed based on the new assumption which my code is assuming or not? Because you might be right now in a situation where you're already running, or in this case you would be already running, the latest version of the web part code, but you haven't actually upgraded the solution in a site level, because there is no, let's say, version by version difference in the web part code which is getting executed. Now, in here we can see that the up version is 1.2.000. We can now go to the site level. We can go to the site contents. We could actually do the following step, obviously, programmatically as well, because it's just a matter of running an ALM API command for upgrading the solution. But let's actually go here. That's asset deployment web part. Let's go to the details. And the details view is giving us an indication that there is a new version available. So you can actually see here, here's a text, there is a new version of this app get it now, because in this site we're running the version 1.0.0 and there is a new version 2.0 available in the app catalog of the tenant. And when we click to get it, what's going to happen is that our upgrade definitions in the XML level are going to be applied on the site, and we're going to install the latest version of the solution. Well, again, technically the installing of the latest version of the solution in this case only means that we are activating those XML structures again. The web part code is already updated. We are already running the latest version of the web part code. Good, it is getting installed. Let me actually click refresh and we should see a new list available pretty soon on the site. It is still getting installed. Let me click refresh. Every now and then the installation, it slightly depends on how the timer jobs are actually behaving, that how fast the installation actually happens or the upgrade operations happens. So this is technically an asynchronous operation, and that's why we're waiting, and we need to wait clicking the refresh whenever the action is actually happening. Now, alternatively, like you probably are aware, you can always go to the Return a Classic SharePoint. This has a slightly better view on understanding what's actually new and what's actually upgrading and what is actually happening. So we can see that the asset deployment web part client-side solution is currently in updating status. The old SPFx list is in a new status that was created 10 minutes ago. And now if we refresh this one, the new list is not yet available. So I'm going to actually start clicking the refresh, and we're going to speed up the video until the operation is completed. And here we go. So that did actually look quite a long time before we first got the new list available, and right, you saw it flipping as well. So actually the solution upgrade is completed. So that actually did took like 3 minutes in this time. So be patient on making that happen. Now, what happened here, once again, just reiterating what we actually did here. So we added a upgrade definition, upgrade instructions for the solution to create a new list whenever the solution is getting upgraded to the latest version. And the new list was called new list. So that's pretty obvious name for a new list, but you can actually see that now visible inside of the site as well as part of that upgrade operation. Also, like said, it's really important to realize that the upgrade operation only was applied for the feature XML definition, the feature XML operation, so the asset provisioning. The actual code of the web part was immediately upgraded when we added the new version available in the app catalog, because the reference, the web part instances in a site level, they do reference JavaScript files and assets directly from a centralized location. So there is no site-by-site running multiple different version option within the SharePoint framework in a tenant level. You would have to deploy them using an alternative solution to make that kind of a site-by-site option available. But now that's all we're going to do in this pretty long tutorial this time, but it is actually deep diving on the XML structures and the deployment of the assets in the site level. Now, once again, repeating the story. So obviously, if you want to use a tenant scope deployment, if you have a web part which isn't dependent and it doesn't want to have XML-based provisioning of a list or an asset, you can actually use a tenant scope deployment option. And that means that the web part is automatically available in a site level whenever it is added on the app catalog. So there's multiple different options on the deployment available in SharePoint Framework. So it's based on a design and based on a solution structure. What kind of option do you want to use within your design? But that's all we're going to do in this tutorial, so hopefully you find this useful. Thank you.